It's a piece of cloth you should have in your closet. It is woven into a rich tapestry of cultural heritage, traditions, and long-standing desire for self-determination. Proudly adorned with unique patterns and symbolizes unity in the Amazonian people.
The cloth's patterns and colors mirror the courage and hope that fueled their aspirations for a brighter future. Each thread represented a story of bravery, sacrifice, and the unwavering commitment to justice.
The piece of cloth, made in Amazonia, became more than just a garment. It transformed into a symbol of a call for recognition, worn proudly by Amazonians and their allies worldwide. It carried a message: we exist and we deserve to be heard. As long as the cloth adorns chests and shoulders, the spirit of Amazonia lives on, and the hope for a free and united land remains alive. The piece of cloth made in Amazonia, a land brimming with history, courage, and the indomitable spirit of its people, a profound reflection of Amazonia's collective identity and our unyielding struggle for freedom.
A full representation of who we are, what we are, the history, story, and the struggle. It's a piece of cloth you should have in your closet. It is woven into a rich tapestry of cultural heritage, traditions, and long-standing desire for self-determination. Proudly adorned with unique patterns and symbolizes unity in the Amazonian people.
The cloth's patterns and colors mirror the courage and hope that fueled their aspirations.
And that is it for the Amazonian people, the Amazonian cloth. If you have not gotten one, place, make sure you gone for one right now. That will keep our history on top. And today I come to you with the history of Amazonia. Remember, for some time now, I've been off and I started off somewhere where I was reading to you some thoughts and some write ups about the Amazonian history. A lot of people think that the quest for Amazonia has just come up now as we got into 2016 and got the impasse that took place when we came out to ask for some changes in our system, the way La Republique was handling us. Now, I'm going to go in today and do my possible best in the continuation of the history. I started reading the history to us some time ago. I will go right in now and send and read to you a conversation that was going on between two honorables who were very much in charge and involved in the situation of Amazonia. And in these write ups, you will see in their history the doubts that they actually casted concerning the quest of us Amazonians, Southern Cameroon, South Cameroons as they call it, joining with Republic of Cameroon. Now, I will go straight, and that is what I'm going to read to you now. It is called the Cameroons, HC DBE, 20th February 1961, volume 635, copy 7272 to 80. That's 270 to 2780. I mean to 280. Motion made and question proposed that this house do now adjourn, Mr. Noble. Okay, the meeting ended at 3 a.m. as it is said, 3:3 a.m. Mr. John Tidney, Liverpool, Wavertree. This is Mr. John now writing. And he says, I am not sure what time it is now in the Cameroons, but I am quite sure that it is high time that the thought was given by some ministers and by the United Nations to the very urgent affairs of the territory of that territory. I ought at the outset to declare an interest in that I am a director of a company which among many other interests has for over 70 years operated in Victoria and elsewhere in the territory, albeit of recent years with declining success. It has a venture also in Bamenda. That's John now writing. And it goes on. The battle of the plebiscite is now over. I pay tribute to the men, many of them from the United Kingdom, who have worked hard to make the administration of the democratic decisions a success. Though they were unable to put the pros and the cons of the result of the choice before the electorate, they tried to make a very nearly totally illiterate electorate aware of what the choices were. I want you to be noting some of the words that they use here, which are very, very important to us. The House will now, the House will know that the ex-British Cameroons, albeit small part of the old German Cameroons, is itself divided between North and South. The North itself is divided by a small strip of land belonging to the Nigeria and Yola, to Nigeria and Yola. The North Cameroons, not by not a very large majority, has elected to become the 13th province of the northern region of Nigeria. How the northern regional government administers a divided province, and and whether women there who in my who in many constituencies outnumber men, that is, women outnumbered men, while agitate to keep their suffrage, is now not for us in this country to determine, as Britain. We merely welcome the sound sense of the northern Cameroonians in decision to join up with Nigeria, which is such a stalwart member of the Commonwealth. In the South, however, things have gone very differently. By an even by an even greater majority than expected, a registered voting population of about 350,000 people, or approximately the same as that of Mauritania or Cyprus, has decided to link up with Cameroon Republic. The South Cameroonian is 273, I don't know what that means, lucky enough to live in perhaps the most lovely country of Africa, varying from the banana plantations of Tico to the 13,000 feet Cameroon mountain. Further north, he has a country which reminds one of Norway on a hot summer's day. It is a country which has great potentials for rubber and for tea. Perhaps the southern Cameroonian made the decision to join up with Cameroon Republic through fear of the Igbo, or because of lack of finance or lack of leadership by the United Kingdom in the past. For we have tried our best to remain neutral. Or was it because he had no third choice offered to him? I am one who loves the territory and its people. Mr. Foncha has been to my home and Dr. Endele and the late Chief Manga Williams, I count among my friends. Mr. Foncha is lucky to lead a country where there is virtually no crime. Can you hear that? Virtually no crime. Yet, I suspect that the United Nations has given him and the United Kingdom as the trust authority an almost impossible task. You can be hearing that there. Have the mechanics of handing over power really been thought out? Will the territory enjoy British or Roman law in the future? Will the tongue that unites the many tribes be English or French? It may be said that both could exist side by side, but that cannot be true in the case of first, currency, secondly, whether the territory is to be in the sterling area or in the franc zone, and thirdly, whether it is to enjoy imperial preference. An even more vital decision must be made soon, nearby in the territory of the Bamileke, just over the border. There is much unrest. Civil war is virtually endemic. What will happen to the border? Will it remain a border? If so, who will protect it? If President Ahijo's security forces pursue armed refugees into the British Southern Cameroons and British troops stop them, for how long will the British public be content if our troops are endangered for the welfare of the people who have just voted themselves out of the Commonwealth, who have chosen union with government which, according to the times of the last terms of the according to the times of the last Saturday, are protesting to the United Kingdom about the conduct of the plebiscite. It may, therefore, he that we should go quickly and with good grace. And with good grace, Mr. Foncha may have had great confidence in Britain and may still hope that we, despite everything, will carry on till he is strong enough to get good terms from President Ahijo. But very soon in his country, the cry may go up, bring the lads home. And then I would ask, who will protect the British and the Nigerians' lives well as the very difficult frontier? There is also the problem of Her Majesty's overseas civil service and of all those on contract and of those who work in the Cameroon Development Corporation, which is associated with the Colonial Development Corporation. This is not the time to go into the pros and the cons of whether a further nearly £3 million of our public money, with all its currency and balance of payments problems, should be paid to what will be in the future a foreign country. Although, of course, it is advisable in some way to help such an underdeveloped land. It may be wise to hand over our obligations to the Cameroon's Development Corporation to the six, perhaps the Germans, with their great reserves and as part of their new African investment program, would welcome a chance to go back and aid their elsewhere territory. I am glad, therefore, that in another place, the Minister of State for the colonial colonies said that that should circumstances then so develop that the state of the Cameroon's Development Cooperation's affair is materially altered, the Colonial Development Corporation are in a position to reconsider their commitments. Official report, House of Lords, 9th February 1961, volume 226, copy for 90s. Would ask my right, honorable friend, what the United Kingdom government act doing to establish a strong local police force without which Mr. Foncha is naturally very weak. Is anything being done to bring back the military trained Cameroonians who are serving elsewhere? Is there any plan for an accelerated police training program? At present, there is no paramilitary wing of the police force. Therefore, there are no mortars and no automatics. Such a force could never match President Ahijo's forces. Should be should they decide to occupy the ex-British Southern Cameroons. You see, prophetically they were talking, but it should surely be strong enough to keep internal orders as soon as British troops leave, which I personally hope will be very soon. These are two people who are talking. One honorable who was talking for the Amazonian people, and the other one responding who was a minister. Now, 275. But before we leave, sovereignty has got to be handed over to what body? To a joint government which Mr. Foncha and President Ahijo set up. But what happens if they do not agree? Do we hand over to President Ahijo himself, or do we risk British lives in what may be an indefinite wrangle? As well as the security problem, let me list the urgent decisions which have got to be taken at once about the Southern Cameroons. Who will present her in the foreign affairs? Will she be accepted at the United Nations, or for the time being be treated as a colony of the Cameroon Republic? When will British currency cease to be legal, to be a legal tender? And with what shall we pay for bananas which come in the fast ships which I see passing the end of my garden in Liverpool? What sort of court of appeal will there be from now on? When will the customs tariff be changed to that presumably of the Cameroon Republic, thereby incidentally probably raising the cost of living? What instructions have been given to stop imperial preference? In 1958, this affected 82,000 tons of bananas worth at that time to the Southern Cameroons as much as 600,000 pounds. And most important of all, what plans have we received from President Ahijo other than his decision not to become part of the French community, thereby losing presumably any chance of benefiting from the expanding European market? I am worried because I think that the electorate voted blind as to the implications of their vote. And since, in the words of Nigeria's Prime Minister, they expect us of a right to live in peace, to cultivate their farms in peace, and to receive the same justice which has been provided for them until now. They may risk losing everything. I am worried too that this has been a problem of many ministries, and it is a problem caused by the limitation of choice by the United Nations, a choice limited to incorporation into one of the two big neighbors on either side of the southern Cameroons. I am worried that no thought has been given to true independence, and thereby we may in the future face another minor Congo. This was in 1961, before the joining. Hear them talking. These are ministers in the UK concerned about the Southern Cameroons. I am grateful to the ministers, to the Minister of State for coming to answer me at this late hour. I would like to put it in, I would like to put it to him that once Mr. Foncha has achieved the end of trusteeship, surely it is up to him and his government to decide the future of his country. It may be that he would prefer independence to incorporation. He may have second thoughts about union with his neighbor. I believe the Southern Cameroons could be viable, certainly in 10 years, once his future is settled. Remember, this is Mr. John Tillen who is talking, who said his company had worked in Southern Cameroon for 70 years. Let us say openly that provided Mr. Foncha should he be urged to independence by his own African friends, decisions on that policy we would help him, especially if he wishes to remain a member of the Commonwealth. If need be, let us have another plebiscite. I fully understand how impossible it was to promise further aid last year. But if he decides to break off relations with President Ahijo, the United Nations cannot force him to unite with his neighbor. Can you hear that? Let me read this again. But if he decides to break off his relations with President Ahijo, the United Nations cannot force him to be united with his neighbor, to unite with his neighbor. The trump cards are in Mr. Foncha's hand, and if he decides to play them, let us back him. Now, the time here was 3:18 a.m. The Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Mr. David Ormsby Gorey, my honorable friend, the member of Liverpool Water Wavertree, Mr. Tinley, has a considerable advantage over me in this debate, as he clearly knows the country very well. My knowledge of it is entirely second-hand, but I am very much impressed by his description of it and the idea of a warm summer's day. I found it rather attractive on a cold winter's night in London. This is the Minister of State, Mr. David, replying to Mr. Tilney, his honorable friend. The Convention of the United Kingdom with the Cameroons began as a result of the First World War, and our responsibility derived from a League of Nations mandate, which was replaced after the Second World War by the 1946 trusteeship agreement between the United Nations and the United Kingdom. We have throughout held these territories in trust, and it is for the United Nations to decide when that trusteeship was terminated. We will have some months at least ahead of us before it can be brought to an end, and I should not like to leave my honorable friend with the impression that as a result of the plebiscite, which has now taken place, we shall be handing over our responsibilities tomorrow or in the very near future. As long as our trusteeship continues, we shall continue to discharge our responsibilities in the Cameroons to the best of our ability. I want to make it clear from the start that we shall make every effort in the period left to use before the end of the trusteeship to ensure that Cameroons are able to face the future in as strong and economically healthy a position as possible. This debate centers around the future of the Southern Cameroons. In the north, as my honorable friend said, the people have indicated by a clear majority their wish to be part of the northern region of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, of the Federation of Nigeria. It is naturally a matter of satisfaction to us that they should have decided to throw in their lot with the newest member of the Commonwealth. As for the South, I must remind my honorable friend that there has been for a long time a strong current of opinion in favor of the reunification of the Cameroonian peoples. These aspirations are embodied in the program of one of the main political parties of the territory, that led by the present Prime Minister, Mr. Foncha, before and after it came into power. When it was known that Nigeria would shortly become independent, the trusteeship council of the United Nations had to consider how to enable the people of the territory to express their wishes about their future status. The trusteeship council took the view, which I think was widely accepted at the time, and which is widely accepted even today in many quarters, that the Southern Cameroons would not be viable on its own. An indefinite continuance of trusteeship not be expected to commend itself internationally at a time when independence was increasingly becoming the order of the day in West Africa. This left two choices: unification with the French Cameroons, not reunification, but unification with the French Cameroon, distinct for independence as the Cameroon Republic, or unification with the Federation of Nigeria. In October 1959, the General Assembly of the United Nations commanded that a plebiscite could take place in the South Cameroons before the 31st of March 1961 to enable the people to choose between these alternatives. As the honorable member knows, these were the only two alternatives which the United Nations decided should be put to the people, to put to the people. Subsequently, the date was fixed for 11th of February. The plebiscite had taken place. The people of the South have voted by a large and unmistakable majority, that is 70% of the votes cast and 57% of the electorate, in favor of unification with Republic of Cameroon. We are confronted by what appears to be a clear expression of the will, of the national will. This is the situation with which we are faced. In order that the results of the plebiscite in both North and South Cameroons should be implemented, we expect the United Nations Plebiscite Commission, Dr. Abdo, to present his report to the Trusteeship Council. about the end of March. It will be it will then be considered in the fourth committee and in the presumed session of the United Nations General Assembly. Implementation of in respect of the North Cameroons should be quite straightforward, for it means in effect re-establishing the position existing before October 1960, when it was part of northern Nigeria, northern region of Nigeria, while retaining the new arrangements for local governments that were then introduced. We are about to enter into the discussions with the Nigerian government on the detailed administrative questions which will have to be settled. In the South, the question, as my honorable friend has said, is a much more complex one. The Cameroon Republic itself became independent only on January 1st, 1960, and it was difficult for this new government, with many internal problems of their own, to put forward precise terms for the unification of the two territories. However, we did that we could do to facilitate contacts between the two prime ministers, so that the people of the South Cameroons, would be aware of the implications of a choice to join Cameroon Republic. As a result of these contacts, the two leaders agreed that the territories should be united on a federal basis, of which the outline was sketched. They made clear their intentions that the federal state would have powers to deal, among other matters, with foreign affairs and national defense, and that a federal court of justice would act as the highest court of appeal. But certainly, a great many details now have to be filled in, and the answer to my honorable friend's question have yet to be worked out. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, several months remain before the Federal Federation of the Southern Cameroons with Cameroon Republic takes place, and we hope all these problems will be solved. For the most part, as my honorable friend knows, they fall within the province of my right honorable friend, the colonial secretary, and I have particularly in mind such matters as the training of the police force and the ensuring of proper security in the territory. We hope to address ourselves to the government of the Cameroon Republic in order that the preliminary discussions may be stated as soon as may be started as soon as possible. The internal security of the Southern Cameroons will certainly be one of the questions to be considered. We expect that in due course there would be a conference consisting of representatives, delegations of equal status from the Republic, from the Southern, from the Republic of Cameroon, and from the Southern Cameroons. We would expect to be associated with the conference as the administering authority, and that the United Nations would also be associated with it. We are, of course, aware of the many particular difficulties that await the fusion of these two countries, as indeed would anyone who has studied the problem at all. Administratively, it would clearly have been simpler if the people of Southern Cameroons had elected to rejoin Nigeria. But perhaps, unfortunately, political feelings are not always ruled by the convenience of administrators. In any case, we cannot believe that these difficulties are insuperable if they are approached with goodwill by all concerned. For our part, we will do all we can to help them to be solved as smoothly and as quickly as possible. The federal structure which is proposed should enable the Southern Cameroons to retain many of the methods to which it has become accustomed. Otherwise, it may have to change. But in this respect, I think we should bear in mind that as recently as 1916, it was, of course, under German colonial rule. We have not got an easy task. We have not got an easy task ahead of us in the remaining period of trusteeship, but the general principles on which we must rest are clear. We must abide loyally both by the decisions of the United Nations to which, as administering authorities, we were responsible, and by the wishes of the people of the country as expressed in the recent plebiscite. It is, in fact, impossible for us to do otherwise at the present time. Naturally, we shall try to see that the drain on our resources is no greater than and last no longer than indeed it need. Suitable economy help from outside, and the honorable member mentioned the possibility of some help from West Germany will no doubt be welcome. But we cannot wash our hands of our responsibilities until the job which with which we were entrusted has been done. We are all anxious to prevent any repetition of recent events in the Congo. It seems to us that our best hope of doing this is to continue firmly on our present course. There are always dangers when new countries are born, always the possibility of something going wrong. But these dangers would have been greater if we had tried or were now to try to enforce reunification with Nigeria in a way contrary to the United Nations mandate and against the wishes of the people. It is suggested that Her Majesty's government should have attempted to retain their trusteeship, perhaps almost indefinitely. It would be difficult to see how we could have reconciled this with our support of the United Nations and our record of promoting independence in West Africa. It would certainly not have involved any less expenditure of British money and troops. We may have we may have a difficult mission to fulfill in the southern Cameroons, but I believe that our duty is clear. We have a duty to the people of the territory and a duty to the United Nations from whom our trusteeship derives. There is only one possible course of action open to us at this time, which is to assist the United Nations to give effort to the verdict of the plebiscite as loyally, as efficiently, and as expeditiously as possible. Now, that is a discussion between the Honorable Minister and the Colonial Office Chair, the Colonial Office person in the in the United Kingdom. Now, as Ambazonians sit down and watch very carefully and practically, I want to let you know that the quest for our land and the discussion for our land has been going on for a very long time. Even in the 1960s, the administering authorities were very much questioning the reliability of the Amazonian people joining with the Republic of Cameroon. And it came out to be very, very true. I'll come back to you after this short break.
Spirit of its people, a profound reflection of Ambazonia's collective identity and our unyielding struggle for freedom.
A full representation of who we are, what we are, the history, story, and the struggle. It's a piece of cloth you should have in your closet. It is woven into a rich tapestry of cultural heritage, traditions, and long-standing desire for self-determination. Proudly adorned with unique patterns and symbolizes unity in the Amazonian people.
The cloth's patterns and colors mirror the courage and hope that fueled their aspirations for a brighter future. Each thread represented a story of bravery, sacrifice, and the unwavering commitment to justice.
The piece of cloth, made in Ambazonia, became more than just a garment. It transformed into a symbol of a call for recognition, worn proudly by Ambazonians and their allies worldwide. It carried a message: we exist and we deserve to be heard. As long as the cloth adorns chests and shoulders, the spirit of Ambazonia lives on, and the hope for a free and united land remains alive. The piece of cloth, made in Ambazonia, a land brimming with history, courage, and the indomitable spirit of its people, a profound reflection of Ambazonia's collective identity and our unyielding struggle.
Thank you very much. That is what you need to get. If you are an Ambazonian, I would want to encourage you. Our history in the making is still on. You've seen the rapper, and of course, a few last year, to be very precise, our president uh, proclaimed, is it this year or last year? Well, whatever, proclaimed that we are the 55th nation of Ambazonia. And according to history, whatever name you give yourself, that is your identity and that is your title. And you can see here with me, in much of our history, I want to come up here with the identity of which our president declared to us, Ambazonia, the 55th nation of Africa, or you can see as I portray to you here, you can see it. It's actually a plausible T-shirt that you can put on, and a lot of people were asking, "What is this?" You now tell them, "Ambazonia, the 55th nation of Africa, or the 55th African nation." That is who we are. Of course, we have easy wares and other household things that any visitor coming to your house can see you with a wall clock, Ambazonia, the 55th African nation. They can see you with a drinking mug, Ambazonia, the 55th nation of Africa, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of those things that we should start to show out and to sell out our identity as far as our Ambazonian quest is concerned. Now, I'm switching over to some comments after the discussion we have just had about the Cameroons in the early 60s, when the administering authorities were contemplating and foreseeing the danger in which we are today. They actually foresaw it. Now, I've read the article to you, and these are some commentaries that have been made by some people. Well, it could be their opinions, but I take their opinions very seriously. This document nullifies fraudulent. This is a commentary now. This document we've just read nullifies fraudulent documents by La République du Cameroun to falsify dates and events leading to the invasion of the southern Cameroons. Now, the British were talking there that the administration authorities had to be there to sign a document of which we have not seen the document to how do you call it? They call it a document which is called, what is that name again? Yeah, to prove that we have entered into the real handing over of our land. But from the document we read, we saw that they agreed uh, privately that it was going to be a federation. And so when it changes from federation, it nullifies the whole concept. Let me just continue to read the commentaries here. The first thing to note is that Northern Cameroons and Southern Cameroons are appellations that came into being by 1946. These two territories have never formed one entity according to their pre colonial histories, but these are imaginations of France who operates on the scene only from 1946. It should be noted that the case of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia is quite peculiar, resembling the Israelite Egyptian relationship of the Bible times. So, this commentary will therefore dwell dominantly on the so called British Southern Cameroons Ambazonia as follows. Number one, British Southern Cameroons from 1800 to 1887 and the invasion of 1961 to 1968 geographical situation. The Facon Mountain, which was renamed by France and her subject, La République du Cameroun, as Cameroon Mountain, while transforming the names of the whole territory by appending names of physical features, rivers, hills, and mountains to all regional naming of the Ambazonian state, Southern Cameroons. This was meant to confuse the British that the land was not the one handed over to France, Cameroon, through the interplay of events at the United Nations from 1945 to 1961. They did this through the falsification plebiscite of 11 February 1961. The Southern Cameroons electorate was so illiterate that the plebiscite was hand-led by the UK, who was only interested in getting rid of her because Ambazonia never opted to join Nigeria. Remember, this is a commentary. The same falsification and fraud followed with the referendum, the unification, and the fusion and the final cessation of La République du Cameroun in 1984 from the federal state insinuated in the plebiscite of 11th February 1961. All this ushered Ambazonia to achieve independence in a federal state on the 1st of October 1961 by joining with La République du Cameroun, who achieved independence as a German-French colony on the 1st of January 1960. One is saying that the majestic Fako Mountain boldly drops into the Atlantic Ocean in the armpits of the Gulf of Guinea and overlooks the whole territory of Amazonia, or as it drops abruptly into the Atlantic coast of the armpit of the coast of West Africa, the nearest neighbor to the former French Africa Equatoria. It should be noted again that the gentle slopes of the Mount Fako that entered the coast provides natural ports free of any sand that will need dredging. Again, there are no rivers that bring sediments to block the coast. This provides the favorable physical condition for wharfs that can easily be built right to the dry land. This natural facility makes shipping as possible as good morning. And during the slave trade era and missionary journeys, the following seaports or the following ports were in frequent use. From the west coast, you have the Tico Seaport, the Bimbia Slave Seaport, the Man-Owobe naval base port that is recently being occupied by Navy of La République du Cameroon, just a stone throw from the petrol refinery, the Victoria Commercial Seaport, and the Edinau Fishing Seaport. That's five. From 1800 to 1847, the coastal region saw the arrival of missionaries sailing or shipping was their only means to shipping was the only means of trans-ocean communication. Air transport was very limited, if not non-existent at that time. During this era, these missionaries carried the English culture deep into the hinterlands, right to Nkambe, to Bangwa, to Nchang, to Nkonsamba, Banga, Mbunda, Fumban, to eastern banks of Wuri River. This river was predominantly impediment to east-west movement. Some of the English explorers, like Alfred Secker, whose monument could still be seen near the invading La République du Cameroon Divisional Officer's Office, Down Beach, Victoria. It is seen that by 1847, Ambazonia had already had culturalized by the English slave traders and later on by the Christianity missionaries. Why was Ambazonia in the hands of Germany as Cameroon? The partition of Africa in 1884. In 1884, the colonial powers met to share what was known as the Dark Continent, firstly because it was populated by people of non-color, and secondly because it had yet arrived at the Industrial Revolution stage. During the Balkanization of Africa, colonists like the United Kingdom, France, etc., have giant shares. For example, France had northern coast of Africa, some limited parts of West Africa, while Britain had the giant Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone of West Africa, East Africa coast countries, and others, being guided by the availability of natural ports. During this partition, some small parcels of land that had been culturized by either traders or Christian missionaries, and through the implantation of their natural languages were left in the hands of such empires or nations and not count as full colonies. Such parcels of region were not officially considered at the partition table of 1884 and therefore not documented as colonies. So Ambazonia was left undocumented, but just left isolated and controlled by the United Kingdom that helped acculturize her with English language and culture. By this time, some areas like those across the west of the River Mongo and River Wuri, right to the present day Chad, Central Africa, Gabon, Congo, DRC. In fact, the whole heart of Africa was not attractive to major colonialists, either because of desert conditions or because of mosquitoes or because of the non-existence of natural resources or natural ports, sorry. For example, Equatorial Africa has only one port serving the Republic du Cameroon, and the hinterlands like Chad, Central Africa, etc., and which is not a natural port since frequent dredging is ongoing. Late arrival of Germans in the race of colonies in West Africa. Well, it should be noted that the United Kingdom had the giant share of colonies in West Africa, East Africa, and even in South Africa, and was more than saturated. So when the Germans came to have colonies in West Africa, the only region left were the equatorial Central Africa, and the colonial nations could do nothing but tell Germany to cross the Uri and fetch the inaccessible desert, unattractive areas lying from the west banks of the river Uri to the western part of this river without any oceanic natural port. It was at this juncture in 1887 that the United Kingdom was sympathetic with Germany, who had no natural ports entering into her Central African colonies, and decided to unilaterally make a gift to Germany of the slave traders, explorers, and Christianity missionary British territory. This gift was to make available the four natural ports: Ambazonia, flanking the gentle slopes of the Fako mountain that project 4,100 meters above sea level into the into the troposphere. So Germany then controlled the area from the eastern frontier of Nigeria into the Central African landlocked region. So Ambazonia went to Germany in 1887 without meeting of the European colonialists, and has never been officially handed to any nation as a colony property because the arrangements were always very privately done. Ambazonia, a gift to Germany in 1887 until 1922. It is unfortunate that German control to cope with the preparations for the 1914 World War, and there was no time to really exert her influence, cultural and otherwise, in this amalgamation of feudal kingdoms. Ambazonia had to do with a choice to fight the war on either the side of Germany or United Kingdom. Most of Ambazonia was feudal, with the overall administration in the hands of traditional leaders, chiefs, chiefdoms, and during the First World War, kingdoms even fought against kingdoms, culminating in the tribal wars of civil wars. This is because some kingdoms still paid allegiance to the British influence, while others to the Germans. They did not know why they should have been fighting a war abroad at all. During this interwar period, Ambazonia continued to have as the lingua franca of the nation English, while the German went ahead with infrastructural development, especially roads were constructed using forced labor with hand implements. Main office buildings were also constructed in elevated defensive sites that could still be seen in Boya, with the Prime Minister's Lodge, the Baminda Upstation Fort, and the Nkambe Station Binju offices, etc. Most of these monuments have been demolished in order to wipe away the past. Open hand, Open land was often left around these areas, but the invading administration of the colonial power had just plotted the land and sold it to foreign population. The Treaty of Versailles concluded the First World War on 18th of January 1919. And by 1922, a series of treaties were signed, and Ambazonia was given the status of a German protectorate, Cameroon with a K. Because during the war, they were confused between for Germany or fighting for the Britain. However, the problem of paying reparations by Germany, Austria, Turkey, etc., especially to France, coupled with economic depression of the 1930s, ignited the Second World War 1933 to 1945. Fought the war for 12 years, during which war Cameroon, Ambazonia with a K, had been in the hands of Germany for 42 years. In 1887 to 1845, fought bravely as a German protectorate, but had to be taken over by the victors, France and Britain. It should be noted that the treaties of 1919 were about breaking up the feudal Europe into independent states, especially the Ottoman Empire, headed by Turkey, and the Austrian Empire, headed by Germany, and the Russian Empire. There were no particular treaties dealing with the colonies, so much so that the punitive economic, military and political reparations imposed on Germany and her allies led to the immediate causes of the Second World War of 1939 to 1945. Creation of southern and northern Cameroons, 1945 to 1946. It should be noted that from the area across the Wuri River, from the West Bank extending to the barren or inaccessible area of La République du Cameroon, Chad, Central Africa, or Gabon, allotted to Germany by the Berlin Treaty of 1884, while the gift of the English slavery, English missionary territory, Ambazonia kingdoms given as a gift to Germany by Britain were jointly given to appellation Cameroon. This name Cameroon was also appended to the whole territory after the 1922 post-war arrangements by Ambazonians, and the German territories were converted into League of Nations protectorates. But there was no reinforcement of these decisions, so much so that Germany still had a firm control over them, and that decision was of non effect. Ambazonia was left under Germany as a German protectorate from 1922 to 1946. The German colony, the present La République, Chad, Central Africa, Gabon, joined the Second World War as one entity of, or as a unit block known as Cameroon. This was because the area was still segmented into kingdoms that existed before the partition of Africa. For example, Ambazonia preserved an identity of various kingdoms that never understood the meaning of the two world wars, and these kingdoms contented themselves with taking part in the war by being conscripted to fight either for Britain or for Germany during the wars of 1914 to 1945. Number one, this was very true because of the English culture area of Amazonia had no cultural link with Germany, since their lingua franca remained to be English. even up to the restoration of their independence of 2016, as stipulated in the United Nations General Assembly Population NGO 1608. And on the 1st of October, on the 1st of January 1961, during the UNGA session of 1st October 1961, scheduled for the independence of Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, 64 nations voted otherwise overwhelmingly for the independence of Southern Cameroons, with 23 nations against and 10 absentees. It should be noted that the closest neighbor, La République du Cameroon and France, voted against, and Nigeria voted for. These tendencies have to have a lot to interpret historically. So, by the population uprising of 1916, never to be compared with any of the Southern Cameroons, Ambazonian decided never to bow to hold out for the restoration of their 1961 independence. Did he make a mistake here? All right. Number two, the German colony of 1984 covered only the present countries of La République du Cameroon, Chad, Central African Republic, Gabon, that had no choice to make but to be handed in totally to France in 1946, because German never paid the reparations which the League of Nations punished her to pay to France by the Versailles Treaty of 1919. It should be noted that Britain left the whole German Central African colony to France because she had more than enough entry ports in West Africa and East Africa. The pre-partition Africa was a unified system of friendly feudal kingdoms. So was Ambazonia. It should be noted that the World War II started in 1939 and was brought to a stop on May 8, 1945, when Germany was eventually defeated and crushed. The end of the war was followed by a series of treaties that eventually converted the League of Nations into the United Nations, that came into being on October 24th, 1945, in San Francisco, California. It was during the various treaties from 1945 and culminating in the Paris Peace Treaties that the war came to a complete halt, leading to the official birth of some nations like South Korea, no, Southern Cameroons and Northern Cameroons. It should, however, be noted that the terms Northern Cameroons and Southern Cameroons never existed before 1945. The punishment meted out to on non-exist Nazist German was exemplary in that all her overseas territories were confiscated and shared amongst allies as separations since as reparations, since they never paid the reparation imposed on her and her allies after the First World War. However, territories that had never been allocated to Germany as colonies, German protectorate, were merely given over to nations as United Nations trusteeship, were entrusted to European colonies to administer them and be given independence when reported ripe. Now, during this time, I need to finish this article today. Let me go ahead. During this process, the English speaking territory adjacent to the eastern border of the giant British territory of Nigeria was supposed to be uh, reverted to Britain as a whole. One is talking of the territory west of the Warri River. That was to include Bonaberi, Banga, Lum, Kongsamba, Chang, Bunda, Baminji, and Banyu. It should be noted that culturally, these people are closer to the English culture than the French. Again, the tea estates that are a feature of Amazonian be traced to Chang, to Djibouti, Djibouti, to Nkambe County, at Ndu, and to Fako County at Tole. Even Dr. Jongo Foncha was from Penka Michel, whose father was transferred to Bamenda to work in the leprosy settlement permanently. They still have a compound in Penka Michel where Foncha's grandparents are aborigines. Why is Southern Cameroon's a misnomer? The sharing of the booty at United Nations was very straightforward when it came to protectorate. And for West Africa, the German Cameroon protectorate was eyed by France with a jealous intention. The guilds France, the guild Gaulle, France had secret arrangements since they were the main decision makers at the United Nations. The western frontier of the English biggest colony of the world, Nigeria, made her to be the saturated within territories in West Africa. So she decided to just silence a chunk of a chunk from her English speaking German protectorate to fill in her southeastern irregular border and instead left out from the Mongo River between the Bonaberi and Bakweri kingdoms, Fako County, through Kupe Mountains between Lum, Banga, Kongsamba, and Bakosi lands, the Mount Mehia between Babajo, Bambumbu, Ndipen, Nipialem, Lebialem, I think I want to say Nipialem, Lipialem and Ashon, Batibo and Pinyin, Bamenda County. For southern Cameroons, Britain sliced predominantly the section at the five natural ports on the sloping coastal section of the Fako Mountain from the eastern banks of River Mongo and moving westward, one will come across the following natural ports, namely Tiko, Bimbia, Manoobe, Port, Victoria, and Edinau. The advent of northern and southern Cameroons in the northeast frontier, Britain also sliced a small chunk off from the German colony, now northwest of La République du Cameroon frontier, or Adamawa, to use in strengthening her neighbor, her Nigerian neighbor. The so-called North Cameroon was sliced from the German colony that formed one block and not from La République du Cameroon because this country never existed with the present identity before 1945. Presently, this compensatory chunk is made up of the following states of Nigeria: Borno, Adamawa, and Taraba states. And since 1945, the so called British Northern Cameroon has remained embedded in Nigeria and as part and parcel of that country. Never, even after Nigeria achieved independence in 1960, and one continues to wonder why they have to always talk of plebiscite here when they were already comfortable with the status quo. The northern and southern Cameroons have never been considered as an entity connected together. The cultural differences are great. The northern Cameroons were Islamized during the Northern Jihad and had been completely immersed in Nigeria since 1945. The southern Cameroons, on the other hand, have been living like the Egyptians Israelites of the Bible in 1800 to 1887, Free English Cultural Territory. 1887 to 1922, German gifts from Britain. 1922 to 1945, German protectorate that fought side by side with Germany in the Second World War. 1945 to 1953, entrusted to Britain as a United Nations trusteeship to nurse her for independence. Britain administered her by the method of indirect rule through her colony, Nigeria, while the so-called North Cameroon was part of the parcel of Nigeria. The Ambazonian Southern Cameroon's member of parliament withdrew from the Nigerian Eastern House of Parliament at Enugu to Boya in December 1953, formed a pre-independence democratically elected government south of the Sahara that time, made up of a legislative arm and the traditional arm, the House of Chiefs, led by a prime minister for one term of 5 years from 1954 to 61. The Ambazonian Southern Cameroons was first country that had a functional government before gaining independence in the 1st of uh, October 1961. The democratically elected governments were as follows: 1954 to 1959, Prime Minister Dr. A.M. Enindele; 1960 to 1961, Prime Minister Jongo Foncha; 1961 to 1968, military invaders of La République Cameroon invaded the lodge where the parliament was in session in 1968 at 1 o'clock under Prime Minister A.N. Jua, escorted him to the lodge on foot, captured the government, and installed Estimuna, who replaced an elected PM, appointed a prime minister on the spot in the person of Estimuna. President Amadou Ahidjo also simultaneously went against the agreed principle of state of equal status, that when the president comes from either Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, or from French Cameroons, the vice president will be from another state. In this way, Estimuna was appointed to momentarily occupy simultaneously the post of Prime Minister of Southern Cameroons and of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Cameroon, and the government of Prime Minister Augustin Ngomjoa, 1961 to 1968, therefore came to an end abruptly end in 1968. 1968 to 1962 to 1972. Well, it's very short document. Let me read this. 1968 to 1972, President Amadou Ahidjo went ahead to disband the mobile wing arm of Ambazonia. My time is up. I will leave this. I will handle this small portion whenever we come up on our Amba history. Well, I believe that those of you who have taken your time to sit down and watch what is going on and what has been going on in Ambazonia, you all agree with me that our history, our history actually is history that we ought to know, we need to know, and to understand that the people who were leading with us before, the people who were like, how do you call them? The British that were in charge of Amazonia, many of them were doubting our relationship with La République du Cameroon. They doubted it. And of course, they actually say that the illiteracy of our politicians at that time was so much such that if Dr. Foncha at that time had refused to follow the Republic of Cameroon in whatever they were saying, the United Nations would have listened to him. If he objected the joining of La République du Cameroon at the onset, that it would have been different. But unfortunately, it didn't work out. And because it didn't work out, many people are now paying the price. And the price is that which has been dictated, predicted. And like somebody rightly said, and as I have been saying, I'll be back with you tomorrow on on politics, on the same word politics. I'll be back to you tomorrow on our Amber history on politics. And I will continue with this write up to let you know that what we are going through is exactly what I told you a few days ago on church and politics. I pray that God will help you and bless you, and that our fight to free homeland will definitely not go in vain. Meanwhile, if you have not gotten your symbols for Ambazonia, please get a cap for yourself, and of course, get a t-shirt for yourself, and let the people know, the world know, that we are not asking anybody any question. We are Ambazonians, the 55th nation of Africa. God bless the people of Ambazonia, and see you tomorrow at the same time. Meanwhile, don't go away. In the next few minutes, you'll be joining us with Hour of Freedom on this very platform. God bless you.
Long-standing desire for self-determination, proudly adorned with unique patterns and symbolizes unity in the Amazonian people.
The cloth's patterns and colors mirror the courage and hope that fueled their aspirations for a brighter future. Each thread represented a story of bravery,